Mayor, it's 4:31.
4:31. Okay. Wait a few minutes. See if do we think Commissioner Puente and Commissioner Uribe are supposed to be here?
Commissioner Uribe said he would not be at the workshop, Mayor, but Commissioner Puente did say he was coming.
Okay, we'll wait a couple more minutes.
Okay. Mayor, Commissioner Puente is parking and he'll be upstairs in a little bit.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's the Amanda, you're like the Wizard of Oz. You're the all-knowing, all-seeing, you know everything that's going on.
I try, Mayor, I try.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, this time I'll call the City Commission workshop, which has been duly posted. We're scheduled for this afternoon at 4:30 p.m. to order. Go to citizen communication. We have no citizen communication. Is that correct, Amanda?
That is correct, Mayor.
All right, so we'll go to item 1, which is the presentation by the Texas Municipal Retirement System representative to discuss possible re-enrollment of the city of Harlingen back into TMRS.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. We do have representatives here from TMRS. And we have placed some information in front of you. You have the TMRS contribution rate information, and they will go over this in just a minute. You also have the impact the updated service credits has to the proposal. And staff also created a spreadsheet, it's a color spreadsheet showing the current cost to the city, which is at the very top for the two pension plans that we have. This is for the city, the airport, and the EDC. Waterworks has their separate pension plan. And the impact that different options would have on not only the costs, but also the unfunded liability. I'll let the TMRS folks introduce themselves and they'll make a presentation. I think they also have some information they want to give out. Anthony?
Thank you very much, Dan. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. I'm Anthony Mills, Director of City Services at the Texas Municipal Retirement System. And it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I would like at the outset to make one commitment to you today. TMRS, we've been doing this for a long time. Since 1948, we have been the retirement system of choice for most cities, towns, and villages throughout the state of Texas, including the city of Harlingen. Harlingen, since 1972, has been a participant in TMRS. It was September 1st, 2007, that the city decided to not enroll any new participants in the plan. But since 1972, there have literally been thousands of folks who have come through the city hall and have given service to the community of Harlingen and has been participants, members of TMRS. And the commitment that we had then, the commitment that we have now is that we run an efficient program, a responsibly managed program that can ensure a predictable, reliable lifetime retirement benefit for those who retire from the city. You have over 350 active retirees who are drawing that benefit today. Every month, the last day of the month, those retirees from Harlingen can be assured that that check will post on time. The commitment that we have is that we will continue to do that for those participants who are still participating and who will eventually retire. And we would certainly do that for any new participants if the city in your deliberation decide that re-enrolling and renewing your participation in TMRS is the direction that you'd like to go. This evening, I'd like to do a couple things because I know that as commissioners, this is not something that you look at every day. I would like to give you a general overview of the plan itself. As you heard from City Manager Cerna, you heard that we have provided staff with studies. Our actuary in-house and our consulting actuary have run the numbers to show you what it would mean to the city, what it would cost the city if you were to renew participation in TMRS, and we can talk about those in detail as well. But I think it's important that you understand the plan itself, how it works, what it would mean to those folks who are currently participants and have been since you turned off participation back in 2007. Those employees who have come to work since 2007 and have participated in a different retirement plan. And we'd like to make sure that you understand just what it would mean to those groups of employees if you were to renew participation. The other thing I'd like to say to you is that we are going to be both a willing and able resource for the city as you continue to deliberate, not just today. If you were to make a decision today, this goes well beyond that. Anything that this commission needs to understand about TMRS, we should be able to assist you with that. With that said, let's make sure that you understand that TMRS, we're not the usual defined benefit plan. Yes, technically under the tax code, we are a defined benefit plan. And by that, I mean that at the end of an employee's career, they will have a benefit that will be calculated to last for a lifetime. But how we arrive at that benefit is rather different than most defined benefit plans that you may compare us to. In TMRS, what we do, we're a cash balance plan. We're a hybrid between a defined benefit plan and a defined contribution plan, because it is the cash balance that your employees build throughout their career by making contributions to TMRS. Those contributions and the interest that grows on the member's account, along with the contributions, the matching dollars that the city sets aside for those participating members, those cash balances ultimately will be converted to a lifetime retirement benefit. And that lifetime retirement benefit is assured, again, to be fully funded by the time that that employee gets to the end of his career. As a governing body, there are a couple things I would want you to know about TMRS. I'd want you to know that there have been substantial changes in the way that our program is administered since you decided to leave in 2007 or turn off participation to new members since 2007. At that time, around that time that you turned off participation, TMRS was exploring several paths to take to make sure that we were going to continue to meet the dynamic needs of our cities throughout the state. I said that we are the retirement system of choice for most towns and cities throughout the state. 896, now 897 different cities have chosen to participate in TMRS. Here in the Rio Grande Valley, most of the cities that you would consider your peer cities, not just here in the Valley, but around the state of Texas, are participants in TMRS and have chosen to come in voluntarily. Those cities who do participate in our plan, I'd like for you to make sure that you understand that some of the changes that we've made over the last decade include putting in place an actuarial funding policy that assures that regardless of the benefit plan design that you put in place, whether it's the one that you have in place today, where right now you sit at about 98% funded status, or you come back into TMRS and adopt additional plan design features, regardless of your plan design, our actuarial funding policy that's in place ensures that you are going to trend your funded ratio, the difference between those assets and liabilities, toward 100%. So that when those employees get to the end of their career, you will have done what you need to ensure that that cash balance is fully funded and that the benefits can be paid to that retiree for life. So the actuarial funding policy has been changed since you last participated or had new members be enrolled in TMRS. We have also gone to a total return investment strategy that's very different than we were back in 2007. At that time, we primarily held bonds in the trust fund. That was primarily the asset allocation that we had in place. We're now a total return, fully diversified portfolio since you were last enrolling new members in TMRS. One of the other things that we've done since that time is we've closed the amortization schedule. We've closed the amortization schedule to ensure that the liabilities that we present to you, that we're very transparent with, those liabilities will be funded over a fixed schedule of time to ensure, again, that over the course of your member's career, your employee's career, the benefits will be fully funded. Those are just a few items that I would like to make sure that a governing body understand about TMRS. Whenever you hear about a public retirement plan that is not in good status, is not a healthy plan, those distinctive characteristics that I just laid out for you are usually some of the items that you can go to see what the problems are. And we address those problems. We told our cities at that time when we were making those changes that it might be a bitter pill to swallow today, but that we'd be able to come back to you in the future and say that this was the right approach. It was the proactive approach. And it was the approach that was going to put TMRS on course to become one of the model retirement systems in the country. And here in 2021, I can say that that is the case. Sitting at right at 90% funded ratio, that is 89.5% funded as of December 31st, 2020, with a 90% funded ratio and trending toward 100 system-wide. That tells you that TMRS, that we're doing things right. When you look at the city of Harlingen, if the city were to choose to come back into TMRS, as you would come back in, the ordinance that you would adopt would put in place the same plan that you've currently adopted. We have provided for staff some additional options for the council to deliberate over, but that would certainly be this commission's decision as to what is the appropriate plan design if you were to come in. I mentioned that as a cash balance plan, it's the employee deposit rate, the 7% that the employees pay in, the 2-to-1 matching ratio that the city's paying in, the contribution rate that you make to TMRS. And under your current plan design in 2022, you would pay 8.75% of your covered payroll. And by covered payroll, I mean those employees who are covered in the plan. Right now, you've got 138. If the city were to resume participation and come back into the plan, you would have 489 employees enrolled in TMRS. Looking at that payroll, we figure out what the actual dollars would be. And your staff has more detailed numbers when it comes to the actual dollars that it would cost. But that's your current plan. If you were to come back into the system, we have provided for you studies to show you what those costs would actually be. And those are included in your packet, and your staff has the numbers that they're going to show you here in just a moment. In addition to the cash balance design, all employees who work here to establish vesting would take 5 years of service. After 5 years of employment here at the city, employees would be eligible to retire at age 60, or with 20 years of service, they're eligible to retire at any age. And that would also be the case if the city were to come back into the system and renew participation going forward. Some of the additional provisions that you already have in your plan include the supplemental death benefit for both active employees and retirees. That's a lump sum death benefit. That's in addition to the retirement benefit. If an active employee from Harlingen were to pass away, we'd pay 1 time his annual salary to his beneficiary. As a retiree, we would pay a $7,500 lump sum. It's no longer tied to his actual salary prior to retirement. It would be a $7,500 benefit if the retiree were to pass away. You have military service credit, restricted prior service credit, and the last time you adopted a buyback was back in 2001. I have included in the packet for you this evening a copy of the draft ordinance. If the city were to renew participation, it has been provided for your staff and pending legal review. Should the city take action on it, that is something that, of course, you would have to use the model ordinance to actually renew participation. And we've also included for you the studies. The studies, if you were to come back into the plan, included on the right side of the packet that I gave you this evening. If you were to come back into the plan as you are today, you would see that the percentage of your payroll, I mentioned to you that under your current plan in 2022, it would be 8.75% of your covered payroll. That's the percentage of that payroll that you would contribute to TMRS. That number would actually be lower if you adopted just the provisions that you currently have and enroll the new members into TMRS. That percentage would be 7.74%. And if you're wondering why would that number be lower, when you look at the breakdown between the normal cost of your rate, think of it as the cost that it would take for the current service for all of your participants, for all of the members at your city who are in TMRS, based on the members' age right now and how much time they've got left in their career before they finally qualify for retirement, and looking at the new income that it would bring into the plan itself, because as it stands, without any new members coming into the system from Harlingen, you're only accruing more and more retirees. But because you're not having any new income coming in, TMRS, we've been using since 2007 for you, a very aggressive level dollar method for you to fully fund your plan, which is why you're right now at about 98% funded status. That is because we've been using that level dollar approach to make sure that you've put the assets on account, because we knew that the income was going to continue to diminish while your retirees were going to continue to increase. And that's the approach that we take when a city takes the unusual. We haven't had it happen many times. I believe once is the only time that it's happened in TMRS's history. But when a city turns off the plan to ensure that you have fully funded the benefit for those employees who are still participants in TMRS, we went to that level dollar approach and a shorter amortization schedule than we otherwise would have used. But the percentage would be less, 7.74% if you came in as the plan is today. Bringing in the new membership, you would see that 7.74. You also would notice that your estimated unfunded actuarial accrued liability is $1.9 million. I'd like for you to understand that under the current plan itself, what we're looking at, I mentioned to you that some of the healthy characteristics of a plan like TMRS is that we have a fixed schedule, a fixed amortization schedule for you to fully fund your plan. And you'll see in this study that the equivalent single amortization period that we're looking at for you here would be 9.6 years to fully fund that liability. The rate that you're paying ensures that you're making the appropriate progress to fully fund that plan over that amortization schedule. And you'll also see in that study the additional demographics for your city based on the data that you provided, that your staff has provided to us. One of the other studies that we included for you include coming back in as the plan is currently designed, but adopting the feature called updated service credits. The updated service credit provision in TMRS, Dan mentioned to you earlier that this is a feature that takes a retroactive look and it grants additional credit for employees who have seen significant improvements in salary over their career history in TMRS, or if there's been a plan improvement to the plan design itself. The updated service credit can be adopted at 50%, 75%, or 100%. It could be adopted on a repeating ordinance or on a one-time ad hoc ordinance. And what we've included in the study for you today is a one-time ad hoc ordinance. And you can see how those different plan design features would affect both your rate that you would pay, and of course, it would affect the estimated unfunded actuarial accrued liability. There's dynamic interplay between the provisions that you adopt in your plan and the demographics that you have here at the city. I also wanted to mention to you, as I said at the outset, that you've got a couple different employee classes here that we would be concerned with. You have employees who were in the system up to August 31st, 2007. They did not lose that membership. I've alluded to it several times, that what the city has been paying for, what the city has accrued 98% of the assets to fully fund the benefits that you've promised under the current plan design that's in place for those 138 employees who are still participating. That benefit is still in place. If you were to resume participation for new employees, nothing really changes for those employees who are already in the system. It's just that the people that they work alongside would now also become members of TMRS. For those folks who came to work since September 2007, it's important to understand that in these employees, we would still grant them credit for the time that they've worked here at the city of Harlingen toward their eligibility for retirement in TMRS. If they've been here for 5 years, but they were never members of TMRS, they would be vested in TMRS when you come in to the system. If you were to choose that option, if you were to choose to come in, the years that they've worked here would count toward eligibility. But importantly, over the years, Harlingen has looked at what would it cost if the city were to resume participation in TMRS. And any study prior to the one that we've run for you this year would look very different than what we're talking about today. And that's because in 2019, Senate Bill 1337 put in place a different provision in our statute. That statute now says that an employee who works at a city that was not a participant in TMRS, if that city comes into TMRS and those employees had a primary retirement in place already, we will exclude the time that they had on the books and were members of that other retirement system. So while we'll grant the time credit, there is no monetary credit. And that's called excluded prior service credit. There is no granting of monetary credit, which means, again, any study that previous councils have looked at since 2007, the cost was significantly higher than what you're looking at today, because the city would have had to grant some type of monetary credit for those employees who did not participate in TMRS.
So in other words, it's good timing.
That's another way to look at it, Commissioner. Or attorney. Okay. The other item that I did want to mention to you, our most recent legislative session that just concluded, we've had a change in our statute as it relates to return to work retirees. In the return to work statute, our current statute says that an employee who retires from a city must have a bona fide separation from that city and cannot go back to work for the city in TMRS that he most recently retired from in a position that would normally require more than 1,000 hours a year. Okay. The September 1 date, this bill that just recently passed, Senate Bill 1105, what it does is it will give cities more flexibility to hire return to work retirees. And as long as there's been a 1-year break from the time that that person retired and the time that they're being rehired for a position that would require more than 1,000 hours a year, they can continue to draw their TMRS retirement benefit and participate and start a new account in TMRS that they'll be eligible to convert and retire when they quit their second stint with the city. Now, uniquely here at the city of Harlingen, What you would want to be concerned with here, and I don't believe we've looked at the numbers, and there was less than a handful of employees that may have been affected by this. Those employees who retired within a year of September 1 would be the only folks who would not be eligible if they retired and are drawing a TMRS, specifically a TMRS retirement benefit, and they retired within a 12-month period. They would not be eligible to continue to draw that benefit. They'd have to suspend the payment and forfeit those monthly annuity payments until they retire that second account. And then we would resume the payments. But for those folks who retired, you may have folks who retired several years ago from TMRS because they became eligible, and now they're back working for the city. As long as there's been a 12-month break between the time that they retired and the time that the city re-enrolls and they become eligible for a TMRS eligible position, those folks would be eligible to continue their retirement benefit and participate in TMRS with a new account. Those are the work classes that I did want to mention to you. Those are the high-level items that I wanted to introduce to you before we get into any of the detailed questions that you might have. And with that, Mr. Mayor, any questions?
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have tons of them. I have to reveal to you that I'm securities licensed and I'm also a financial analyst. And I do retirement plans,
Okay.
defined benefit and defined contribution. So there was a person that came a few weeks ago. If I can recall his numbers, your air is 6.5%. Is that correct?
6.75%.
6.75. And last year, he said you all paid the participants 5%.
That's correct.
Okay. Even though you're a total return portfolio and the S&P 500 cap weighted returns 16%, you paid 5%. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you said it's a total return. Define your percentage of US stocks, international equities, commodities, bonds, cash, foreign exchange that is in your current total return portfolio.
I cannot give to you specifically today the breakdown of the asset allocation item by item, but I can certainly provide that information back to you, Commissioner. I will tell you that in general, we have about a 60-40 split between equities and more stable value investments.
Defines more stable value investment.
We have absolute return. We have real return. We have core investments. And those are investments that are trying to protect against inflation. Thank you.
Okay. And how many of you are here this evening?
We have 3 people here. I have my Chief Service Officer, Eric Davis,
Okay.
is here this evening. Lorraine Moreno, one of our regional managers, is also here.
Okay. And are any of you securities licensed?
No, we are not.
Okay. Now, you're not a public company, and you're not associated with the state of Texas. Is that correct?
And when you say not associated with the state of Texas,
You're not a Texas government agency.
we are a quasi agency. We were created under the Texas government code under the TMRS Act.
Okay, so teacher retirement system, when there are bad years, the Texas legislature bails out the teacher retirement system, and they take the money from the taxpayers to make the TRS whole again, however they define whole, whether it's actual or on an actuarial table. Are you eligible for bailouts?
Fortunately, in our history, we've never had to be bailed out. I
Right,
will,
right,
I will
Right,
point
but
out to
that
you
wasn't
that,
the question. Are you eligible to be bailed out by the Texas taxpayers?
no, we are not.
Okay,
We are not.
okay, so you're a private company. So are there any records available as to how much you manage, how much profit you make at the end of the year? What are your internal salary? What are your fees on managing the money? Who does manage the money?
All public record, all
Okay,
public
and
record. Technically,
Where
we're
may I
not.
find that?
You can find it actually at our website.
Which
and
is,
It's at tmrs.com.
okay,
Click on the investments link. And we have here this evening our comprehensive annual financial report. That will also give you the breakdown of both the investments and many of the questions that you've asked this evening.
great. That's wonderful. I'll be sure to look at that.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned a life insurance policy, and I thought, well, geez, that's great. And then I looked down at your paper and the city would fund the life insurance policy.
Yes, it's a self-funded.
Okay,
benefit.
so it's not a benevolent package from you. It's something that the city funds.
That's correct.
And then, so the employee contributes 7%, and then the city matches 14%. Is that correct? It says here 2-to-1.
What happens is the city pays an actuarially determined employer contribution rate. The contribution rate, that percentage that you heard me mention a couple times,
Right.
that percentage covers the matching dollars, the actual matching dollars that you would need to have on account to ensure that you can make that 2-to-1 match.
Okay, so the council and the people need to realize that should this become underfunded by poor performance of your investments or poor performance of your investments, realizing poor stock market and bond market returns, it's no skin off your back, but it creates an unfunded actuarial liability. And so then what we're talking about is CalPERS, the California retirement system, which is billions and billions of dollars underwater. We're talking about Chicago, Philadelphia, New York City, Detroit, where the elected officials give the employees a wonderful retirement system and they kick the can down the road. And so we have a AA+ bond rating. And for those who are unfamiliar with, that's like your FICO score.
Yeah.
And so the greater our unfunded liability, that reduces our FICO score, our bond rating. And so a few years ago, 8 years or so ago, when the stock market had a couple of anemic returns, the city had to give the firefighters defined benefit plan $1.9 million to keep it actuarially sound, even though we don't have to fully fund it for 20 or 30 years. We keep kicking the can down the road. And so corporately, not municipalities, corporations, for the most part, have done away with defined benefit plans because it strangles the corporation. It strangles their growth. It strangles their dividend. It strangles their ability to buy other companies or to reinvest in new technology or within themselves. And so I'm going to pause my questions and ask the mayor here. He was around back then and he's a good historian. So why did the city stop the TMRS in 2007, Mayor?
Well, in 2007, we had a lot of concerns that Commissioner Mesmer just described, and that was the nature of the plan was a defined benefit plan. A lot of the corporations, such as the airlines, several airlines, American, Continental at the time, had gone bankrupt, and in order to get out from under these defined benefit plans, because that's what it is just an absolute requirement to pay a set amount for the benefit, and it really wasn't tied to investment performance. It was strictly tied to a promise to the employees under the defined benefit plan program. The other aspects of it were that our unfunded liability, I think, had reached somewhere like 14 million.
No, it was just under 16 million.
Okay, just under $16 million. And the Government Accounting Standards Board principles had changed. Before, you didn't have to list that on your balance sheet because it was an unfunded
CAFR.
liability. But the GASB changed their rules, and now cities were required to report the unfunded liability on their balance sheet. It showed up on your comprehensive your CAFR, and so what Commissioner Mesmer was talking about, it affecting bond rating, and the city's ability to borrow funds at low rates is impacted by that. The other advantages that we're seeing by going to a 401k style program is flexibility that the employees had accessing their funds.
Yeah.
I don't think you have that feature with TMRS while the employees are employed. And so the commission made the decision that by seeing what was happening in a lot of other cities and employment plans, that it would be not only safer for the city, but safer for the employees to move out of TMRS. Appreciate what you're telling us about, changes in how you do business. I don't know. That's news to me, and we might want to hear more about that. I'd like to hear more about that.
I would like to point out to you, Mayor and Commissioner, the items that I mentioned to you at the outset. I wanted to go back to 2007 because it could be understandable for a governing body to look at the trends to figure out, well, what does this actually mean? For the commissioner who made the point about your FICO scores and the liabilities and where they're headed and what it means to the city's credit rating, one of the things that I would point out to you is that with the changes that we've made over the last decade or so, those changes, including the actuarial funding policy that I mentioned, the closed amortization schedule, and the diversified total return strategy, looks very different today than it did in 2007. And specifically, we made that decision to ensure that we would be a well-funded, solidly solvent system as we moved into the future. And that's exactly what has happened. And not only that, when you look at the items that I've mentioned that we did change about the approach and our management of the system, the way that we administer the system, most of our cities and the auditors see this as a model public retirement system. And the FICO scores of our cities, by and large, it's a plus.
May I ask more questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. So when one retires, is it a fixed rate for the life of the employee? Should they choose that option? That they get the same amount every month, year after year? Or does it rise? Do they get pay raises every year?
Okay, that would be the governing body's decision here at the local level. You would decide whether or not your retirees would get any type of cost of living adjustment going forward. Once we've calculated the retirement benefit, without your commission taking action, that would be the lifetime monthly retirement benefit for your retirees. But at your disposal, you do have the option to grant, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, you have the option to grant cost of living adjustments on either a one-time basis, ad hoc, or you could adopt it on a repeating basis.
Right. And COLAs is what bankrupted Social Security when inflation was going high because we lost 2 wars in the 60s. Inflation went up through the roof. And Richard Nixon, to quell the people, put in COLAs and Social Security. Previous to that, it was just a fixed payment. And on a fixed payment, people get poorer every month as the Federal Reserve prints more money to feed the government, and it loses the buying power. And then currently, interest rates are 0.1%, 1%, 2%. And you have a 60-40 mixture, you said. And so 40% of your portfolio is currently getting killed to inflation, because the official rate of inflation right now is about 5.4%. The unofficial rate is upwards of 11% because the government and the Federal Reserve lie. They do not count food, gasoline, or housing costs. For any of us who've gone to the store in the last week, we know that there's shrinkflation
Mike,
as
we have
well
to,
as
Mike, we have to
inflation.
worry about the city of Harlingen, not the United States.
Excuse me. I was talking to this gentleman. Thank you, Mr. Pettis. So that if the city adopts a COLA, then our future unfunded liabilities can go up through the roof. And so that would force the city to be solvent, like the previous cities in the states I've mentioned. We would have to raise property taxes to fund retirement plan for the employees, and not raise taxes to dig drainage, and not raise taxes to pave roads, but to feed the employees. And so a defined benefit plan is gone in private industry, as I mentioned, and it's only public municipalities that keep feeding into these defined benefit plans, because politicians will do most anything to get reelected, even if it's fiscal suicide and fiscal imprudence.
Okay,
So I had a quick question. So you said that the majority of the cities here in the valley have TMRS, correct?
That's correct.
So obviously something's good about it because they have it.
There's a lot that's good about it.
Yes, I agree. And it's because the way I see TMRS, I know you're getting all this information, and you have some good points, Mike, but it's a tendency for you to go for the doomsday scenario, always looking for the bad thing. I could say if I walk out the street, I can get run over too, but that's not going to stop me from going, walking out on the street. But the way I see the TMRS is, I've talked to a lot of employees in general, and in general, this is something that I think that the employees want. They do everything they can to serve us, the commission. You're talking about the police officers, all the other employees. They do everything they can to serve us. And I think this is we're putting us back onto TMRS. I think this is a good way of taking care of them, to make sure that the time that they give to us is rewarded down the line. And I think this would be a good investment for the city to do. You can keep putting the numbers out there, Mike, and I know you're real good at that because you're really good at numbers, and I commend you for that. But it's always going to be a doomsday. What if this happens? What if that happens? But I think ultimately that this is the right thing to do for the city, for the employees. I think they deserve it. I think they want it. And I understand how you're saying that, a lot of private industries are getting away from this and only the public municipalities. But you know what? We're not private. We're public. Okay, we're a municipality. I want what's best for our employees. And I honestly think this is something that would benefit them each and every way. I had a question on the 401k.
Yes.
On a 401k, if you have a 401k and you run out of the money that you made on your 401k, what happens?
You're out of it.
So if I live to be 90 years old and I have say $1 million in my 401k and I live to be 90 and I run out of that money, I don't get no more money?
Ultimately, the difference between a defined contribution plan and a defined benefit plan will be when you get to the end of the road. The cash that you build up in your defined contribution plan, that's what you've got to work with.
And with you guys, if I live to be 100, will I still be getting a check?
You'll still get a check.
Okay.
And if your survivor that you've dedicated a benefit to is still living, that person continues to draw that benefit as well. And it's been fully funded by the time you get to the end of your career.
So in other words, you're telling me that by getting to TMRS, not only are we helping our employees for the retirement, but we're also helping their families as well.
You're helping their families, and most of your retirees live within 10 miles of City Hall. So those retirees are spending money right here in the Harlingen community.
So I don't know how you could be against that, Mike. We're not only helping our employees, but we're helping their families.
You know, when I manage money for clients,
Yes, and there's a long history with that goes with that, Mike.
I manage risk. If you manage risk, everything falls in place. And he told you they have a low risk portfolio, which is actually a high risk portfolio because of 40% in bonds, making far, far, far less than inflation. The other thing is then someone has TMRS and they have an emergency and they need to borrow money. That cannot be done, correct?
That's correct.
Right. And so, but in a 401k that they currently have, they could borrow money and pay themselves back.
And there is nothing that I'm aware of that would keep the city from having an optional 401k that employees could continue to
Yeah.
have and could keep that loan
But what
option.
this
The
all comes
employees-
down to is we don't have a money
The
tree.
employees that have like, we have the 401k right now. So say we go with you guys, with the TMRS, will they be able to keep they'll be able to keep their 401k, right?
Yes.
So they
The answer is yes.
So they'll still be able to borrow off that.
The employee contribution and
Well, let Dan finish answer the questions. I'm interested in this too.
so they'll be able to keep the employee contribution and the city contribution both
Okay. On the 401k.
on the four, yes.
And they'll still be able to borrow off that.
From the TCG plan.
The TCG plan, yes.
Okay, so that takes care of that. You were worried about them being
But-
able to benefit.
but-
So
but-
think about it.
Well-
They're not only going to be able to borrow off that, but with the TMRS after 5 years, right? You said they're vested after 5 years.
Yes.
So not only that, but they can borrow off that. Plus, they're going to have a check for life. Plus, they can give it to their kids as well. ¿Qué más quieres?
And so the city would be funding 2 retirement plans for the employees. And we don't have a money tree. And if you want to put the city into
Actually,
financial
if you look
hot,
at this
do
paper right
that.
here, it's not really that much of a difference. Even if we get to TMRS and we do with the 50%, what is it called? The US.
Updated service credit.
Yeah, updated service credit from what we're paying right there. Right now, we're currently paying $2,014,617. If we go back to TMRS and just do the 50%, we're only paying $31,280 more. So I think just at
Right,
the
but you're
minimum,
gonna go-
even going to
Right,
the
but you're gonna go
50%.
from you're gonna from zero, you're gonna go from $600,000 unfunded liability to $2 million without any service credits. And then it goes, and then with a 50% service
goes to
credit,
4 million.
goes to 4.5 million.
Yeah, I
So
know, I see it right there.
you're increasing the city's unfunded liability from, so you say there's no cost, there is a cost because it's going to show up on the balance sheet as going from currently a $600,000 unfunded liability to a $2 million unfunded liability. So let's just be clear that
No,
there
no,
is a,
yeah, no,
that
I
there
get-
is a cost. And
Yes,
it's going
yes.
to, and it is going to be a liability for the citizens and taxpayers of the city to.
Unfunded liability, what does that mean?
So we have we have 1 minute left until the regular meeting starts, but this is an action item on the agenda later. And and you're not Mr. Hardy, right? I'm sorry.
No, Anthony Mills. Anthony Mills.
Mr. Mills, are y'all going to stick around for the
Sure.
later?
Mayor, they would love to stick around, so they'll stick around.
All right. Well, anyway, so, we have another minute to ask questions. But we'll have more time later in the meeting to discuss this further.
Absolutely. And Commissioner, I do have that portfolio breakdown for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody have a question?
Yes, I have a road. No, I
30
apologize.
seconds though, Richard, and that's real hard for you, bud.
apologize for being late, number one, but, and I might have missed this, you may have covered this. If an employee works for the city for 20 years, and they invest the same amount of money into it versus the GCG plan and your plan, which one grows more money at the end of the 20 years?
That would be hard for me to say, but I can tell you this, the difference between what is really, I think, what most people would be concerned about when they get to the end of the career is how long is it going to last?
That's a super good question. Let's start with exploring that when
Why?
when we come back.
Yes, but, so I wanted to get to something to think about. The second thing is if we have employees that were on TMRS retired, started collecting, made a draw from TMRS or getting a draw from TMRS.
Yes.
They've now come back to work for the city and they're under the new plan.
Mhm.
How does that work? Do they have to give up that draw from that first plan? And what happens to the other thing?
Two things. It depends on the date, on the date that they retired their TMRS account. And when will they be rehired for a position that is eligible for participation in TMRS? If it's been more than a year after September 1st, they can do both. They can keep drawing the TMRS retirement and start a brand new TMRS retirement benefit.
So,
Okay, Commissioner, we need to close the workshop.
okay.
We're gonna have it on, we're gonna get to talk about it some more, but
There's
the
an
5:30
item on the
meeting is-
agenda for this
now
again.
5:30 and we need to start so we'll close the workshop at this time and go to our regular city commission meeting agenda.
Yes. Thank you,
So-
Mr. Mayor.
So at this time, I'd like to call on Commissioner Frank Puente to lead us in an invocation, please.
I'd like to start off with a prayer or a verse that I personally like. It's John 14. And it's, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go prepare a place for you? And when I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, will take you to myself, that where I am, you may also be. So I ask Jesus to bring good ideas as we come together here in our minds and in our hearts to make all the right decisions for all the citizens here in Harlingen. In your name, Lord Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thank you. Amen. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,